Hello dear music friends and fellow sound engineers, I'm Brice Deloze. We are in Incident's studio and today we're going to talk about loudness. Why? Because I realized that actually everyone is talking about loudness and about LUFS or LUFS or LUFS, but still there are a lot of misunderstandings on the topic, so I started to explain again things to a friend and a client this afternoon, and I realized that actually this was a nice topic to make a video. So because it's Friday evening and before starting, let me drink a little bit. Alright, so first things first. People saying you need loudness, or no, we now have streaming platforms with loudness normalization and loudness is not a topic anymore. Thing is, it's depending on the music you're making. If you're making classical music, if you're making country or folk music that is mainly played on streaming platforms, I agree. People are listening on the platform. What matters is the sound on the platform. Yet, but this will be for later in the video, we'll see we can actually beat the algorithm. But if you're making music that is going to be played by DJs and experienced by people on a dance floor or on a festival, you need to achieve a certain loudness target, because otherwise your music will sound weaker compared to the other ones, and so a DJ might not pick up your track, or if he plays your track in a set, it will sound quieter, and so it will not have the same impact. So for all those reasons, if you're making music that is meant to be experienced on a dance floor, on a festival, you want to compete the loudness ballpark of the music genre. It's, let's say, it's not an overall loudness, it's depending on the genre, but overall idea is, if of course you make a track that is at -14, like what everyone says is for the streaming platform, it isn't, but whatever, and your track is going to be played in a set at -9 or -8 with the competitors, it will sound weak. So that's the first part. Now let's talk about streaming platforms, and the big problem today is this misunderstanding between LUFS, because there's not one LUFS, LUFS, but there are three. The momentary, the short time, and the integrated. And people don't realize that. Many people are looking at the meter on something like Pro L2 from FabFilter, and by default this is showing you only the short time LUFS. You can switch it in the menu. You can flip to momentary or integrated, but by default it's showing you the short time. So what are the differences? Well, momentary is really like the peak loudness perception. It's like peak level but converted into LUFS. Short time is on a short period of time. The length is not important. And integrated is during the whole length of the track. Streaming platforms are using integrated LUFS to lower the level of the tracks that are above -14. I'm only talking about lowering because every release today in electronic music will be above that ceiling, so all the tracks will always be turned down. The question is, what can you do to be turned down less than the others? And why is this still relevant? Well, it's a silly battle, because it's all started with the radio and why we started to compress music. When you have a signal that is compressed, that is perceptively louder, it's more attention grabbing, and the human brain perceives it as better. It might sound silly, but it's how it works. Louder sounds better to some extent. If you really squash things out, even for club music, if you have no punch anymore, you have loudness but you lose the impact, so you need punch, but overall that's the big picture. And so even on streaming platforms, if you can achieve to have your track sounding louder than the others, it will stand out in a playlist. People might be more grabbed. It's not for nothing that today's commercials on television are still louder, more compressed than the movies, because the commercials are grabbing your attention. So let's get back to the streaming platforms. They are using those integrated LUFS. This is an algorithm that is dictated by the ITU. It's created by the Audio Engineering Society, and there is something interesting in there. Because at the beginning, people thought like, oh, it's integrated, so it's taking the whole length of the song. I'm just going to add silence at the end of my track. And so the average calculation will make the average loudness lower and I will be turned down less. But they thought about that. And so the calculation isn't taking in consideration parts that are too quiet. But by how much? And this is really interesting. How the integrated LUFS is working is it's calculating a first averaging of your track. Let's say -8. You have an average of your track that is at -8. And you have quiet parts that are actually below -18, 10 LUFS below that average level. Those quieter parts will not be taken into consideration in the measurement, which is silly and sneaky because it means that actually while your average loudness is in fact quieter, it will be measured as louder because those quieter parts will not be taken into consideration. So as much as we are talking about crest factor when it comes to microdynamics and the difference between the peaks and the RMS level, we can talk about a kind of LUFS crest factor that is the difference between the average LUFS and the quieter LUFS part. And this is the gate for loudness targeting, that is 10 LUFS below the average. So if you want to beat the algorithms and having your music standing out on streaming platforms, the idea is to, for example, add a longer outro, but be careful that that outro is not more than 10 LUFS below the average level. Another trick that is used by many mastering engineers for years, and that is handy either for the DJs but also for the streaming platforms, that's working on the breaks. And if you lower the level of the break, again 2, 3, 4 decibels, not more, and paying attention that you're not below that -10 LUFS range, not only will you gain some LUFS in the calculation, in the integrated calculation, but also when the drop will drop, you will be slammed in the face harder. Even on the dance floor, you can have quieter parts. If the music is playing at 100 decibels, you can have a part where it's at 80 and people hear each other talk a little bit. It doesn't matter if it's for a short period of time. The good thing about that is music is made of contrast. It's made of tension and release. And so if you have a quieter part in the break, the drop will drop harder perceptively because our senses are working in a subjective way. We have no absolute measure. We work in comparison. So if you have a quieter part, when the louder part is hitting, it will sound louder. If the quieter part is quieter, the contrast is stronger. So I hope with this you understand a bit better the differences between short time, momentary, short time and integrated LUFS, and the differences between music that is meant only to be streamed and for DJs to be played on dance floor, and how to treat the algorithm even if you plan to go to streaming platforms. And I wouldn't be surprised to see a lot of artists in the coming months and years adding longer outros to their tracks just to beat the algorithm. Last thing about that, in fact, there is an update in Izotope RX that is called Loudness optimisation, where it's analyzing your track and showing a line, which is the line below which the track is not being analyzed in the integrated LUFS calculation, and it allows you to do some upward compression, so increasing the loudness of the quieter parts in order to get those parts into the proper area. This is very complex and sneaky, but you get the main idea, and I hope now, next time you're going to talk about LUFS and about loudness, you will also understand the difference between the integrated part and the short part, the short term or the momentary LUFS. I hope this was helpful and that it will help you bring your music to new heights, and see you soon for more.